Democrat Senator Chuck Schumer continues to grandstand against Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville's principled stand to protect human life. Now, you'll recall that the coach responded to the Department of Defense's illegal abortion policy, where they unilaterally changed it without congressional approval, by placing a hold on military promotions. Well, Senate Scared Leader Chuck Schumer claims that this stand for life is, quote, harming military readiness and risks damaging U.S. national security. Now, the part he leaves out is that the Department of Defense can change their policy at any time and simply go back to the way it was, and guess what? Senator Tuberville would remove his hold. So who's really harming military readiness? Joining me now to discuss this is FRC's Executive Vice President, retired Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, who spent the last 36 and a half years in the United States military, the last 4 years as the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. He's also a founding member of the Army's Delta Force. General, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Tony. It's good to be here in this beautiful place today.
Well, it's good to see you. Let's start with this. A lot to talk about. A lot happening in the military, actually, this week. But Schumer, looks like he orchestrated a letter from 7 former defense secretaries, including 2 who served with Donald Trump, saying that national security, military readiness was being affected by Senator Tuberville's hold on these military promotions. And essentially what they said, the letter said, was leaving these and many other senior positions in doubt at a time of enormous geopolitical uncertainty sends the wrong message to our adversaries and could weaken our deterrence. Your thoughts?
That's the opinion of 7 people. I disagree with it. And the reality is what Tuberville is doing requires a lot of courage, because he's almost standing alone on this issue. But he sees what's wrong with our military today that has been brought on by this administration with no consideration for how does this impact the readiness of our military. And if you can't say that it impacts the readiness in a positive kind of way, you need to change that policy. And as far as these guys go, it's people like Jim Mattis, who fought Donald Trump on the transgender issue until Trump eventually forced the issue and Mattis resigned. So that's the kind of people you have that signed that letter.
So they're saying that, they're making it sound like, they're not saying, they're making it sound as if you don't promote these people, you have vacancies in the military and you have command posts that are not being filled, but that's not reality, is it?
It's not reality at all. The reality is, my last assignment, I was a 3-star, but I started that assignment as a 2-star, and because I was under investigation over something which was ultimately dismissed altogether. So I went in and as a 2-star, I did a 3-star job. You can do that. You can put somebody in those positions, or you can stabilize the people that are in those positions for the good of the service, the good of the nation, because they did take an oath.
Right.
You know, and they are obliged, so they can do all kinds of things, and it's not devastating.
Okay, so let's talk about something else that I think may be more at the heart of affecting military readiness and national defense. Play clip number 15, please.
That first year in the Navy, I did not do drag for like almost a year and a half when I first joined. I didn't do drag. I was learning to be a sailor, and after kind of getting back into it, I kind of almost refound my love in drag again because of the Navy.
All right, so this week we had a group of Republicans in the House and a group of Republicans in the Senate sending a letter to the Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin saying, what's up with the drag queens? The Navy has these digital ambassadors that are actually using TikTok, which is banned by government agencies, as trying to do an outreach. Of course, we also have we have members of the Biden administration saying this was not about recruiting. I'm going to play this clip number 17.
The program I believe that you're referring to was the Navy Digital Ambassador Program, which was a pilot outreach effort. It was not a recruiting effort. For more information on that, I would direct you to the Navy. But this pilot program has concluded, and the Navy is evaluating the program and how it exists in the future.
So it's an outreach program, but not a recruiting. What are you outreaching for?
Tony, this is more of the nonsense that we get out of this administration when we are concerned about very serious things. I can't even watch that. I mean, I saw it earlier today on the computer, and I can't even watch that. The Navy is trying to expand. They're trying to grow the Navy. They're trying to add another 5,000 people to the Navy. But they're going to come up about 1,600 people short of their recruiting goal this year. Does any of that have any logic whatsoever? That they come up with that kind of nonsense and thinking that that's going to help recruiting, and the reality is they're going down, not up, in their recruiting.
Well, I mean, you've got the Chinese Navy that's launching aircraft carriers, destroyers, and our Navy working on pronouns and drag queens.
And the Chinese Navy is the largest Navy in the world today. And the Chinese have surpassed us in so many other areas, yet we are focusing on this woke agenda at the expense of having our young men and women, America's blood, ready to go to war when that war comes. And our enemies are growing in terms of strength as well as tenacity. And this is for a guy like me, this just makes me distraught to see what's happening to our military.
Senator Tuberville, in responding to the claims that his hold on these promotions was affecting the military and its readiness, he pushed back on that in a recent op-ed, pointing to these drag queens and others as this is the military's Bud Light moment.
Yeah, it is. Hopefully this kind of thing, when people look at these ads like we just saw there, people have to be disgusted, but they also have to be concerned, because what's our military supposed to be made up of? Warriors, and that is not a warrior that we're showing on this.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. But I want to talk about the agenda behind this. See, I think this is intentional, not just to make the military, woke, but I think it is to make it toxic to the conservative Christian young man and woman that disproportionately has historically filled the ranks of our military. When you look to see where military enlistees come from, is generally from the Midwest, the South, those that have a higher representation of faith than not, because they understand what Jesus said, greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for his friends. But what happens if you completely eradicate an environment, or actually make that environment hostile to people like that? They won't come. And then what do you end up with?
A bunch of mercenaries. That's what you wind up with. You wind up with a mercenary army. If they don't have something to fight for, if they don't believe in something. I told a young man here last night, his mother said, what would you say to him as he gets ready to go out into life? And I would say, know what you believe, but more importantly, know why you believe it. And if you don't have a reason to fight, you're nothing but a mercenary. And that's what has separated America from so many of these third world countries. America's youth have stepped up after taking that oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. They've stepped up and risked their lives for this nation.
So there's two, I think, very obvious problems with a mercenary-minded force. Number one, I think of the book of Nehemiah, when Nehemiah gave the rallying cry, "Fight for your homes, your sons, your wives." Fight for the things you care about, the things that matter in this life. And if you're a mercenary, you don't have that. You fight for remuneration. You fight for gain.
You make your own rules. That's the thing. As a mercenary, you make your own rules, because there is no uniform code of military justice that tells you what is acceptable and what is not. And that is a dangerous situation.
But it also, a mercenary force is easily controlled. And in generally speaking, they have they lack the moral compass that keeps them headed in the right direction. I mean, you think about what it would be to have a military force that is equipped with the latest, greatest technology that has no moral foundation.
Yeah, I agree with you, but let's be clear, when you say they're easily controlled, in the big picture, they're easily controlled. But when I say they make their own rules, this is where you get the war crimes. This is all about how they execute a military operation.
Yes, I agree with that. My point on the easily controlled is the Constitution and the boundaries in which our military operates on. If they are told to go beyond that or do things that are anathema to the way of American thinking.
They're illegal.
Right.
International laws. Yeah.
And that, I think, puts not just the world in a dangerous position, but that puts America and our freedoms in a dangerous place.
And just ask yourself, look at the Ukraine situation, and for the last 450 days or whatever it is, the Russian soldiers have been committing atrocities.
Right.
Now that's with a nation that they are allegedly fighting for. But the reality is they have no foundation, no spiritual foundation. They have no moral foundation, and they are out there executing war crimes.
Right. Well, I'll be very straightforward. I'm concerned about if we build a military that lacks that moral foundation, where we have made it toxic for people of faith, and all we get are mercenary-minded, that same military can be used against us as Americans.
Just like the IRS has been used against us, the CIA, the DIA, and the FBI, that's the government turning our own infrastructure against us.
And the thread that runs throughout all of those agencies and what you just described is the expunging of faith and making it an environment that is outright hostile to faith. So that brings us back to a question that you and I often get, and that is, given the military and where it stands, should our sons and daughters join the military? And you and I have talked about that. I wouldn't say we've debated it, but we've had some very frank conversations about that.
Well, I will tell you, and you know very well, that I'm very conflicted on this issue. On the one hand, I know that if people with a moral foundation, Christians, don't come into the military, then we will have that mercenary army that we were talking about earlier. At the same time, if they are not solid in what they believe and they don't know why they believe it, they're risking going to the other side.
My response, I agree with you. My response is to these parents that ask this question: well, if you'll send them to a public college, then you should be prepared to send them to the military. But they need to be prepared no matter where you send them. They need to be equipped with a biblical worldview, understanding, as you said earlier, why they believe, what they believe, and why they believe it, so that they can defend it. And I think more than ever, we need to be sending men and women into domestic law enforcement, to the military, to every aspect of government that have a bold, courageous, biblical understanding of truth and will stand for that. Young men like Jacob Kersey over in Georgia, who would not back down over putting a Facebook post over what marriage is. That's the kind of young people we need to be generating, and that falls to us as parents to be doing that.
And I'll say this one thing. We also need to understand that this requires leadership to turn this around.
Yeah.
We can't let this go on without fighting it.
Yeah.
It requires leadership. That starts at the ballot box. And it's not just President of the United States, who, according to Article 3, is the Commander-in-Chief. It is about those down ballot names that are on there that could be very supportive of the military.
Right.
That could be on one of the military committees. And we need to make sure we get out and vote, and we vote right.
Well, and it goes all the way down to the school board, so that we have, we're stopping this indoctrination that's taking place of our children that are, being made comfortable for this woke agenda.
Absolutely.
Well, General, I want to thank you for joining us on this Friday. Grateful to you for your service to our country and for continuing to speak out for freedom and for what is right and what is true.
Thanks, Tony. And again, beautiful place you have here.
It is. We are blessed.